I've made a whole series of videos recently about feeling of meaning, feeling of knowing, feeling of what happens, feeling of morality, feeling what's right and what's wrong, feeling of what happens next. There's probably a bunch of other stuff I could write about. But I think there's a couple of things I need to think about if I'm going to get much further with that stuff. One I don't think I can get very far with at all. One is to do with, kind of what's doing the feeling. When I say, that knowing something is accompanied by a feeling of knowing, then there's a question there about, well, what's doing the feeling of knowing? What's the experiencer? What's the dancer in that dance? I don't think there's an answer to it, I think it's probably an artifact of language, but I'll have to give some thought to it. But the one I can start to think about, I think, is this thing to do with feeling, because I'm using it generically right now, as if there's just one feeling that associates with knowing and associates with meaning or associates with morality. And I don't think that's the case really. I think I can do a bit of work trying to get inside that and figure out some differences or identify some differences. I think feeling the meaningfulness of something is different to feeling certainty about something. And I think that's different again to feeling the moral value of something, to feeling whether something's right or wrong and so on. And I think identifying those differences would help for me, at least, to clarify what's going on there. And also just to think more broadly about this term feeling, and why feeling is a useful term, if it is a useful term. Because some of these feelings are quite subtle, and some of them are not subtle at all, and some of them don't feel even present. Some of it feels like a wrong word in a sense, but I don't think it is. I just think there's degrees of subtlety. So for example, when I talk about the feeling of something being right or wrong, and I'm really glad I came across this, is there are quite identifiable feelings associated with that. Maybe feelings of disgust, or maybe feelings of repulsion. I can absolutely feel it. It's a very clear, identifiable emotion. But there are other feelings, like this feeling of knowing something, which isn't so clear except in very specific circumstances. I mean, there is this sensation of what they call a tip of the tongue sensation, where you know something, like somebody's name, but you just can't put it to mind, or you know the name of a song that's playing, but again you can't get it on the tip of your tongue. That's a distinctly felt sensation. But a lot of feelings of knowing something don't present themselves as anything like as strongly as that, and it's a much more subtle kind of shading of experience and sense of knowing. I mean, to the point where most of the time I think when we feel we know something, we wouldn't recognise it as a feeling at all. It's just a feeling of regular existence. It's just, this is what it's like to be awake. This is what it's like. It has a feeling. Excuse me. Pardon me. It's being alive and awake has a feeling tone to it, but it's so prevalent, like the smell of oxygen. It's just there the whole time. We don't even notice it's there. And I think the feeling of knowing is a bit like that a lot of the time, unless it's elevated by some circumstance. So you do get that tip of the tongue sensation. And the same thing with the feeling of meaning. A lot of the time it's really subtle. It's part of the background kind of noise of being alive and awake, and it's only when it presents itself in slightly more elevated form that you notice that meaning has a feeling to it. And here I'm thinking about the kind of meaningfulness, the sense of meaningfulness that you get from coincidence, or that you get when particularly significant things happen, or when you take certain psychoactive chemicals. I mean, they can produce that sense of meaning. In fact, I think there's probably an argument that those chemicals, which are sometimes called entheogens, God-producing chemicals, are candidates for that, for the generation of a strongly felt feeling of meaning, as opposed to the background feeling of meaning that we all have all the time. But I do think those things are different in quality as well as in degree. I think feeling knowing of something, feeling certainty, is different to feeling meaningfulness, as I say. Okay, so where am I going with this? Yeah, I suppose I'd need to find out some distinctions. If I'm interested in trying to plot the distinctions between what it's like to feel something as meaningful and what it's like to feel something as certain and what it's like to feel something as moral, I'd need to find a vocabulary to talk about those differences and the starting point. And I think the best way in, or the way in that I'm finding most available to me right now, comes out of that morality thing I was talking about. Because morality, feeling whether something is good or bad, feeling whether something has moral value or not, is quite a clear sense, quite a clear feeling. And it's a clear feeling that is absolutely associated with the body, I think, in a relatively straightforward way, and in a quite well identified way. I mean, I did talk in a previous video about the disgust reflex, which is this set of completely somatic, embodied responses that we have to things that disgust us. But that isn't just things that are physically disgusting. It isn't just coming across a big pile of dog shit, for example, or it isn't just about that kind of thing. We also get the disgust reflex to its metaphorical application to moral situations, and that's pretty well established. But it definitely establishes itself in the body. You know, being disgusted about someone's moral behaviour is expressed, and not just expressed but felt, in the body, in the same way that toxic substances and disgusting substances are expressed, or the response to those things are expressed. So you get this curling lip as if you're about to vomit. You often get this strange gagging thing in your throat here, which sometimes changes the tone of your voice as if you're about to vomit. You get the kind of toe curling sensation sometimes. Yeah, there's a whole kind of repertoire of fully embodied responses kick in. So the feeling of morality, at least in the way that I've just expressed it there, isn't just some arbitrary term. It refers to some quite specific bodily changes that's going on, with all of the, you know, the kind of hormonal and biochemical changes that accompany that, really. And I'm guessing, although I don't know for sure, I'm guessing that the same is true for the others, for the feeling of meaning and knowing and all that stuff. I mean, I've already talked a little bit about the tip of the tongue sensation, which is a physiological sensation. It does feel like something. It does feel like it's happening here, you know, which is a different place to where the feeling of disgust is happening. And the feeling of meaningfulness happens in a different place with a slightly different somatic profile. So I think what I'll be trying to think about is what these different feelings refer to, or what kind of embodied responses correlate with these different feelings: knowing, meaning, being certain, what happens next, what's right, what's wrong. If I can.